All right. Hello, everyone. It's Sybil Starr. It's December 23rd, and I'm here to talk about the upcoming solar eclipse that happens on December 25th. For those of us here on the West Coast, 9:12 p.m. is the time of the actual new moon. The eclipse actually lasts, over several hours, but it is not visible here in North America. It is visible in places in Africa and Southeast Asia. It is what is called an annular eclipse, means that it is the kind of eclipse that has the ring of fire around it. This eclipse occurs at 4 degrees 6 minutes of Capricorn. And so what I wanted to say about this is that, well, to begin with, the sun and moon are in Capricorn, and that is the eclipse. And the eclipse, the moon moves in front of the sun and blocks the light of the sun, except for the corona right around the outside. There are actually 7 points in Capricorn. At this eclipse, there is the sun, the moon, which are conjunct Jupiter, the south node, the dwarf planet Ceres, which is the great mother goddess, and a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn. And those two have been dancing together for quite a while, all through 2019, but they become exactly conjunct on January 12th, and that is a beginning of a 34-year cycle. And we'll talk about that, what that means. Now, Capricorn is the sign of mastery. It's one of the signs of mastery. And this eclipse occurs, like I said, on Christmas Day, which is basically 3 to 4 days after the solstice. And there was a belief, or not a belief, at the solstice means standing still, the sun standing still. And the sun appears to stand still for 3 days at the summer solstice. Or excuse me, at the winter solstice, at the summer solstice too, both of the solstices. And it appears to move again on Christmas Day and on the 25th. And so there are a lot of masters that are born on Christmas Day. There is Jesus, Krishna, Mithras, Dionysus, and many others, as well as many other masters who were born under the sign of Capricorn. And Capricorn is ruled by the planet Saturn. And it was believed for many millennia that Saturn was the last planet in our solar system, because it is the last visible planet that you can see with the naked eye. Although some people say they've seen Uranus with the naked eye. So it was believed to master this solar system and to master planet Earth, one had to master Saturn, and Capricorn is the sign ruled by Saturn. And so it is about moving through, basically being a spiritual being, moving through the material world and all of the pitfalls of the material world. And so it feels like we are getting a master teaching in Capricorn and in Saturn right now. And so what does that mean? Saturn Capricorn has to do with maturity. It has to do with being an elder. And it is wisdom that is gained through living, not through anything you can read in a book. It has to do with character, integrity, self-discipline, all of those things. Like they say, your character is your fate. It's the sign of the grandparents, the grandmother and the grandfather. The grandmother got eyes in the back of her head. They always seemed to know what you were doing. The grandfather who was loving but strict. You knew what you could do and what you couldn't do. And we seem to have lost that. And that is there also respect for elders and elder wisdom. And not everyone that's old is an elder. But there is elder wisdom that is gained through living that is really important to pay attention to. Saturn is also the sign of the ancestors. It has to do with our past, and it has to do with our ancestral lineage. Now, the symbol for Capricorn is the ancient one is the sea goat, which is about creating form out of the formless. So it is about manifestation. Saturn and Capricorn make everything real. Without Saturn, uh, the ruler of Capricorn, everything would remain a dream, because Saturn does rule this material world. And it is the law: for every action, there is a consequence. And so these are some of our teachings that are up for us right now. Edgar Casey, in his teachings, Capricorn had to do with our First Nations people, Native American people, and their wisdom that they carry, and the element, of respect, of inner strength, of how to move through difficult times and how to plan well. Okay. So these are some of the teachings that we are getting. And I shared some of these teachings with my astrology group, and one of the people in there said, well, it sounds like it's time to put on my big girl panties. And that's exactly right. I mean, that absolutely, and Saturn, does also have a very dry sense of humor, or Capricorn, and can be very funny. And yet, yes, it is time to put on our big girl panties right now, because we have some hard work to do, and it's just where we are in the cycle right now. Saturn is in its own sign of Capricorn, and Saturn brings about contraction, limitation. It shows us where we're out of alignment, but the good thing about Saturn, it also shows us what we need to do. Okay, it doesn't just beat us up. It says, okay, you missed a step here, you stepped out of alignment here, and you need to go back and fix this. Okay, it's sometimes I relate it like an IKEA puzzle. How you sit down, you put or an IKEA project. You sit down, you think you know what you're doing, you put it together, and it's wrong. You have to take it all apart, go back, and then do it step by step again. Where did I miss something? And that's kind of the way Saturn works. And so Saturn times, you often are playing Mother May I. It's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Sometimes 1 step forward and 2 steps back, depending on how far out of alignment you have stepped, or what you missed. Because there's no shortcuts with Saturn. It is like things have to be done by the book, basically. Saturn is called the Lord of Karma. Like I said, for every action there is a consequence, and it can be good. I mean, Saturn can bring rewards, but we're actually at a pretty strong day of reckoning. Like I said earlier, it's time to put on our big girl panties. Saturn is our mountain to climb, and with Saturn in Capricorn so strong right now, we have a mountain to climb personally and collectively. Well, let me just keep going. Yes, Saturn has a lot to do with our patriarchal system. It has to do with governments. It has to do with all of our institutions of civilizations, the structures. Saturn rules the structures in our lives, whether in our body, it's our bones, whereas in the outer world, it's those structures that we have created to support us and our civilization. Now, Saturn is conjunct the planet Pluto, and it's conjunct at the eclipse, but it becomes exact on January 12th. And so Pluto is god of the underworld. So when you combine the Lord of Karma and god of the underworld, it sounds a bit ominous. And it is. Yeah, it's true. Pluto, god of the underworld, is really about the god of the inner world, of our unconscious, taking us deeply into those places where we're still living from our wounds, to bring them into outer awareness so that they can be healed. Okay, Pluto is the greatest healer of all, but it's not easy because it takes a lot of self-honesty. And so And it's also collectively, um, Pluto brings to light the underbelly of whatever, the unconscious, the underbelly, what has been hidden, to the light. And when Pluto was transiting through Sagittarius, um, it brought about healing in the Catholic Church, but it brought it by bringing the pedophilia, and the corruption in the Catholic Church to light. Okay, so that there's a potential now to maybe for it to heal itself if it continues to hold people accountable and responsible. Well, now we're going through the same thing in the government, and it is the corruption that is coming to light. And Saturn in Capricorn is about holding people accountable and responsible, um, for their actions. For every action, there is a consequence. And so, I'm going to talk collectively first, and then I'll talk personally what this means. And I'll continue talking about it through the year, because this is just a huge, part of the energy for the year of 2020, as it is about rectification, bringing things back into balance. And so Saturn and Pluto come together every 34 years, or approximately 33, 34 years, something like that. And it is about right use of power. Okay, it is about responsible use of power. I don't want to say right use. Let's say responsible use of power. And it brings teachings of integrity and moral authority to our authorities. Okay, and so as we can see, things are falling pretty short in that area right now. But it is bringing it to light. And for us as a people collectively, it is like drawing that line in the sand and saying no more, as it comes to light. This is just not acceptable. And so it's about claiming our personal power and seeing all the ways that we have given our personal power away, our personal authority, put it that way. So it's about standing in our personal authority and being informed about what is really happening, because there is so much misinformation flying around. So it is our responsibility to get to the truth and to know what the truth really is. And so 500 years ago, in 1518, Saturn and Pluto were conjunct in Capricorn. And that is the last time. 500 years ago is when they were actually conjunct together in this part of the sky, Capricorn. And so what happened 500 years ago? Well, one of the main things that happened is the colonization of the Americas and the subjugation and the devastation of the native peoples that lived here. And so this 500-year cycle is coming to an end. And it's like we can't go forward until we go back and deal with what has happened here, at least here in North America, and it's happened, all over the world. This colonization and the devastation that it has brought to people. And so the way to heal anything is to first acknowledge there's a problem, and then to ask for forgiveness and make amends. And so the question is, how do we do that? And that is something that really needs to be dealt with upfront. And yes, and so and it's also about bringing forward that wisdom from the people that have been the caretakers of Mother Earth for so long, bringing that wisdom forward. And as we heal this big wound that happened and is the end of this cycle, and as we move forward and hopefully into a new and better cycle. And just also to remember that the personal is political, because what happens internally is what creates the outer world. And so there is a lot of, I'm going to say, holding ourselves accountable. I mean, on one hand, Saturn is that inner judge, but the more positive aspect is like the grandfather, like I said, who knows what's right and wrong, and loves us, and is strict, And it shows us where we've stepped out of line, or where we've made a mistake, or where we need to go back and fix things. And so, yes, it's about putting on our big girl panties, and owning our stuff and fixing what needs to be fixed. And the other piece is doing what needs to be done. Saturn brings in that concept of whatever it is that we need a new level of mastery on. That's it. New level of maturity, new level of mastery, and doing what needs to be done to get us there. Because Saturn gives us nothing for free. We work for Saturn. We are in a Saturn time, and it is time to work. But it's, like I said, it's also about looking at the places where we may give our own personal authority away, where we need to stand up for ourselves, where we need to be in alignment with truth and authenticity. And it is a time of manifestation and creativity, but we need to be in alignment with that truth and with Creator. So it's about looking at places where we say no. And recognizing that as Pluto is also, crumbling. It's about breakdown, and the breakdown in these structures that we have made, is triggering fear, and is triggering a lot of fear. And so people can get very rigid when they, because it's difficult. And the shadow side of Capricorn and Saturn, one of them is control and authoritarianism. And we see authoritarian governments rising up all over the world, in many different places. And we also see the people rising up. They're both happening at the same time. And so we need to be prepared here in the United States that there's definitely a more authoritarian kind of philosophy wanting to happen. Hopefully it will not happen, but it could move into that direction. So we need to be prepared to set boundaries and say no of what's acceptable and what's not, and really, stand up for that. And the other piece, the shadow side of Saturn and Capricorn that Pluto is triggering, is old crystallized emotional patterns within our own psyche, especially around judgment. Judgment is based in fear of the other, as well as feeling somehow that we're not good enough ourselves. And so that gets projected out into the world. And so judgment right now, we're seeing it just at pathological levels and how a divisive and cruel judgment can be to those that are not deemed worthy, not good enough, not as good as us. And so, it pits people against each other. And that is really what's happening. And that is, it's very divisive. And so it's really important to know that this is conditioning. And that's the other thing we're healing. Saturn, like I said, has a lot to do with the patriarchal paradigm. And personally and collectively. And so recognizing the conditioning that we have had around this. So there is a big piece of radical self-forgiveness. First, it's self-honesty, and then radical self-forgiveness as we let it come into our awareness, where we judge ourselves, where we judge others, because this is what has to heal for us to move on, is this judgment. And it's it is a big part of the Saturn Capricorn paradigm. And one of the pieces is that some lives matter more than others, and we know in our hearts that's just not true. All lives matter. But this is some conditioning that has come through. And this is something that wants to come into our conscious awareness to let it be healed and released. Now, just a couple more things. Jupiter is conjunct this eclipse. And as I talked about, Jupiter brings in the big picture. Jupiter brings in faith, opportunity, good fortune, and a remembrance that we are not alone, that the whole universe is here cheering for us to make this shift. Mother Earth is shifting into higher dimensions. And as the Shinto priest once said, a Shinto priest that I heard, as he shared a prophecy that uh, Mother Earth is shifting into higher dimensions, and we are going with her. The question is, how smooth or difficult will it be? And these Capricorn teachings are teaching us how to come back into alignment, to make it easier to shift into those higher dimensions. And Rick Tarnas says we're going through the eye of the needle right now. And so it is about coming into alignment with truth to be able to go into through that eye of the needle and shift into those higher levels of consciousness. And I just want to share a quote as my closing, and it is about tough love. Capricorn and Saturn is about tough love. And it says, people have the idea that God's love is sweet, gentle, and kind. But sometimes God's love needs to shake the sleeping soul and awaken it, because this is the lifetime that soul has chosen to awaken to truth. And soul is often in a very deep sleep. It needs one spiritual jolt after another to finally become aware that there is more to life than what meets the eye. This is Harold Klimp, How to Survive Spiritually in Our Time. And we are at a time where we're being shaken. Our souls are being shaken. We need a jolt to wake up, because we are moving, and we need to be awake to be able to make this shift and this move. All right, wishing you all the best in the coming month. And I'll be back in 2 weeks with the lunar eclipse, which is also very powerful. All right, wishing you all a happy holiday.